Alright, so Doctor Strange 2 in the Multiverse of Madness is finally out, and I'm actually about to go see the movie later today. I'm actually going to go and rewatch the original Doctor Strange film first, and then I'm going to go see the sequel in the theater later today. But before we get to that, I wanted to put out this review of Spider-Man No Way Home. Because I get the feeling, not having seen the movie yet, but I get the feeling that this film is going to tie into Doctor Strange 2 to some extent. I don't know how much, but considering that both films involve the multiverse and, both films obviously include Doctor Strange, I figured there might be some kind of connection here between the two films that is going to be prevalent as a plot point in Doctor Strange 2. So I was like, you know what, let me go ahead and put out this review of Spider-Man No Way Home. That way, I kind of have this on the record and everything. And plus, I just rewatched the film not that long ago, and I kind of want to talk about it. So let's go ahead and dive right into this review of Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, obviously, this review is going to contain spoilers, so spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the movie yet, I don't know what you've been doing the last few months, but, it's out on DVD and Blu-ray. Go see the movie, or, it's on, I guess it's on Disney Plus as well. Go see the movie and then come back to this review. But I'm pretty sure like 99% of everybody on the planet has seen Spider-Man No Way Home. All right, so diving into this film, there was a lot of hype, a lot of anticipation going into this movie, and for good reason, because they were bringing back, the original live-action Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, as well as the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. And, as someone that grew up, specifically with the Tobey Maguire version of Spider-Man, this is a dream come true, because, we were never really sure if we were ever going to see Tobey, don the Spider-Man costume ever again in a film. Especially because, Spider-Man 3 did not do all that well from a, critical reception. Even though I don't think Spider-Man 3 from the Tobey Maguire trilogy is as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. It's definitely the weakest film in that trilogy, but I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people would like you to believe. But, because it didn't really do all that well critically, there never was a Spider-Man 4, even though there was plans for a Spider-Man 4 in that universe. It never came to fruition. And then, of course, we have the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man film series, which sadly, got, put on the back burner, eventually just, canceled. After the, the failure of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, personally, I was someone who really enjoyed the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, the one with the lizard. I thought that was a really great film. I think Andrew Garfield was a really good Spider-Man. The second film, it definitely, fell short of the first film, for sure. I think they were trying to do too much in one film. I think that, the way that certain characters were written, such as Electro, for example, wasn't really done all that well. Harry Osborn could have been a little bit better in that movie, although I did like Harry Osborn's Green Goblin. I like the design of him. I like the presence of him. I think I still go back and I rewatch that scene, the final battle between Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Harry Osborn, Green Goblin. I still go back and rewatch that scene quite a bit. And I think that design, a lot of people do not like that design, but I think it actually works for what they were going for. It's very creepy. Instead of the Goblin thing being a mask, it's part of his body. It's like a Goblin mutation type of thing. I mean, I think it's creepy. I think his presence was actually very good. So I actually do like a lot of things from the Amazing Spider-Man film franchise, and unfortunately we never got a real conclusion to that story. We never really got a resolution to that particular Peter Parker, although they do try to kind of give us that in this film. I still would like to see an Amazing Spider-Man 3 at some point, to be honest with you, but we'll dive into that a little bit later. Let's go ahead and dive into this film. So coming off of the previous Spider-Man MCU film, Spider-Man Far From Home, of course, we had the whole situation with Mysterio and everything, and Mysterio had set up this trick to where he revealed Spider-Man's identity as Peter Parker, and also, made it look like that, Peter was a murderer, that Peter killed him. And that's how the film ended, with J. Jonah Jameson, revealing Spider-Man's identity, which, funnily enough, in this universe is also played by J.K. Simmons. Of course, J.K. Simmons, very famous for his role as J. Jonah Jameson in the Tobey Maguire films, and he comes back to play J. Jonah Jameson in this movie. And it's not, unlike, I know we have all this multiverse stuff going on in the film, but this is not the same J. Jonah Jameson from the Maguire movies as what we get in the MCU films. They're actually two different versions of the character. So it's not like J. Jonah Jameson from Tobey Maguire's universe crossed over to the MCU. That's not what happened. It's just two different versions of J. Jonah Jameson, both being played by J.K. Simmons. And it's really funny. It's a nice callback. It's hilarious. And, he does well in the role once again. It's hard to imagine anybody else playing J. Jonah Jameson in live action. It really is. So, Spider-Man's identity is out. MCU Peter's identity has been revealed. Everybody thinks he's a killer. And it causes a lot of pressure for him and MJ and Ned and Aunt May. And it's just, it's a mess. And so he's trying to figure out a way to get out of it. He's trying to figure out a way to fix this situation. He actually gets a lawyer at one point, that being, the MCU Daredevil, so, and I was actually surprised to see that they brought in, Daredevil for this. Of course, he's not in the costume. He's not actually, playing Daredevil in the movie. I'm not saying, that Peter and Daredevil team up or anything like that. That's not what happens. But, the character is in the film, that being Matt Murdock, Daredevil's secret identity, does play a attorney for Peter in this movie. So I am curious to see where they're going to go with that. I know there was a Daredevil show in the MCU. I'm not sure if they're going to continue that storyline. I've never actually seen the Daredevil show. I'll be honest with you. I never saw it. I never saw Luke Cage, either. I never saw any of the Netflix Marvel films or Marvel, TV series. Only ones I've seen is actually WandaVision and Loki from the Disney Plus streaming service. But are they going to go in that direction? Are they going to introduce Daredevil as a full-on superhero? I don't know. Is the Daredevil show canon? I have no idea. But it was, a nice, Easter egg. It was nice to see him in this film. So ultimately what ends up happening is Peter has to go to, Stephen Strange, Doctor Strange, and he has to, try and see if he has some kind of spell, some kind of magic that can, fix this whole situation. And funnily enough, he does have a spell to where he can erase everyone's memories of Peter Parker being Spider-Man. Now, at first, Peter's all for this. He wants this, he's like, okay, let's do it. But then he kind of realizes, wait a minute, so that means MJ's not going to remember I'm Spider-Man, and that means that Ned's not going to remember I'm Spider-Man, and Aunt May's not going to remember I'm Spider-Man, and a lot of the other superheroes aren't going to remember that I'm Spider-Man. I don't know about this. So, as the spell is being cast, he's trying to change the spell, to where certain people can remember or not. And because he's trying to change the spell during, while it's being cast, it ends up, blowing up in his face, and it causes, other Spider-Man universes, that being the Andrew Garfield universe and the Tobey Maguire universe, to start blending into the MCU. And the first effect of that is the villains. So we have Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 2. We have William Dafoe as Green Goblin from Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 1. We have Sandman from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 3. And then from the Amazing Spider-Man universe, the Andrew Garfield universe, we have the Lizard and we have Jamie Foxx's Electro. And all these villains are coming in. It's almost a Sinister Six. Not quite. It could have been. We'll get to that a little bit later, but it's not quite a Sinister Six. It's a Sinister Five. So I think they wanted to do Sinister Six, but that just didn't end up happening. So we have all these villains coming in from these other Spider-Man universes, and they end up getting captured by Peter and by Doctor Strange. And Doctor Strange is like, hey, we need to send these guys back, because if we don't send these guys back, them being in our universe could have, dire consequences for the multiverse at large, for the fabric of reality. And, Tom Holland's Peter Parker is like, no, wait a minute, hold on. Like, if we send these guys back, they're all going to die. And, he's wanting to help them. He's wanting to rehabilitate them. He's wanting to fix whatever caused them to become villains in the first place. And so what ends up happening is there's actually a conflict between Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. And, the end result of that conflict is Doctor Strange actually gets taken out of the movie for a very long time, until really right near the end. And I have heard some people criticize that by saying, Doctor Strange isn't in this movie enough. And it's like, true, yes, but this is really a Spider-Man movie. This is meant to be a movie that celebrates the Spider-Man. It's not a Doctor Strange film. It's a Spider-Man movie, and it's really supposed to be a celebration of all the live-action Spider-Man. So I didn't really have too much of a problem with that. But yeah, Doctor Strange gets taken out of the movie for a while, leaving Tom Holland's Peter Parker to, help the villains and try and fix them. Try and fix what made them villains in the first place. And, try and, save them, try and send them home, and maybe give them a second chance. So in trying to do that, he seems to get help from William Dafoe's Green Goblin. He gets, he's trying to help Dr. Octavius. He's trying to help all of them, and really it's William Dafoe's Green Goblin that, seems to be, on his side, all gung-ho with this plan, trying to help Peter come up with ways to fix the villains. And so the first villain that they do end up fixing is actually Dr. Octopus, and I really like this because, if you look at Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man 2, he wasn't really all that much of a bad guy until the accident, until, the miniature sun he was trying to create ended up exploding, and ended up damaging the safety chip in the arms, in the octopus arms. Because if you remember, there was a safety chip, there was a fail-safe that was supposed to keep the artificial intelligence, the AI of the arms, from taking control of his mind, and influencing him. And that ended up getting damaged in the accident, and they started influencing him, and that's how he became Dr. Octopus. So they're able to, restore that fail-safe. They're able to create a new safety chip, and Dr. Otto Octavius is able to have full control over the arms. They're no longer influencing him, and it works. He goes back to being a good guy, and I enjoy Dr. Octopus in this film as, this ally. He's, from this point forward, he's not really a villain in the film. He's trying to help Peter, and he's trying to stop the other villains. He's trying to he's got a new lease on life, and he's trying to help the others get a new lease on life. But then tragedy strikes. We get William Dafoe's Green Goblin, who is not actually, gung-ho for this plan. He's not actually trying to fix himself or fix the other villains. This is all just a ploy, and it's actually the Green Goblin in control. And one thing I did really like that they did confirm in this movie, because I think it's always been kind of a stupid fan theory. A lot of people speculated in the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, that the Green Goblin personality somehow came from the Green Goblin mask, like some kind of magic going on or something. And I always thought that was kind of dumb because, as far as I know, there's not really magic in that particular universe, at least not as we typically think of it. So I always thought that was kind of a dumb theory. They do confirm in this movie that the Green Goblin persona is a split personality. It's something inside of Norman Osborn's brain, because he even destroys the Green Goblin mask in this movie. So no, it's actually inside of his head, inside of his brain. It's a split personality, which I always thought everybody knew, but there was a fan theory for many, many years that it was actually the mask that was in control of things, that's where the Goblin persona came from. But no, the split personality of the Green Goblin takes over, and bro, William Dafoe in this movie is just something else. This is some next level stuff, bro. I mean, don't get me wrong, William Dafoe in the original Spider-Man Sam Raimi film, as the Green Goblin, as Norman Osborn, was, evil as hell, man. And just a lot of people would criticize his performance as being too cheesy, too comic booky. I love the hell out of it. And he goes just full blown next level with that performance. He is evil as hell. He is just, you love watching him on screen. You love to hate him. That's what it is. You love to hate him. So he ends up betraying Peter. He betrays the other villains. They all escape. Electro doesn't want to be fixed. He feels like that if he loses his electric powers, that he's not going to be anybody anymore. He's going to go back to being a nobody, which ties into his whole storyline from the original Amazing Spider-Man 2. And Sandman just wants to get back home to his family, to his little girl. The Lizard is kind of an interesting character in this movie because, at first he's not really fighting against Peter, but he's just more so sitting in the background like, this is never going to work. You don't know what you're doing. I'm just going to sit back and wait for everything to fall apart. And it does all fall apart because of William Dafoe's Green Goblin. And he is evil as hell. He is just, you can tell William Dafoe is having so much fun with this role. And even though he's an evil bastard, you love to see him on screen. You love to hate him. And what ends up happening in the chaos of the villains escaping is that, oh my goodness, we got the scene. So we have Aunt May, and, she's telling Peter, she gives the line, the Uncle Ben line. Instead of it being Uncle Ben this time, it's actually Aunt May. Aunt May tells Peter, she's like, Peter, with great power comes great responsibility. And I was sitting in the theater and I was like, oh, she said the line, she said the thing. And then my mind immediately started thinking, oh no, she said the thing. The line, the thing that will get you killed in a Spider-Man film. And yeah, that's what ends up happening. Green Goblin, William Dafoe's Green Goblin, ends up killing Aunt May. And it was like, oh man, the scene was so good. It was very tragic, and Tom Holland's acting in this film, Tom Holland as Spider-Man has never been as good as he is in this film. He really hasn't. He is so good in this film. This moment was so tragic, and the Goblin is just so freaking evil. He's just taunting Peter. It's disgusting. Again, you love to hate him. But, the scene was so tragic, and so finally we get the line in the MCU, with great power comes great responsibility, and Tom Holland's Peter Parker ends up going off, he's angry, he's broken, and so we have MJ and we have Ned, and, they're trying to find out where he went after the chaos of the villains escaping, and they end up using some of Doctor Strange's magic, and they end up bringing in, and this is the moment, this is the moneymaker right here, this is where the entire theater lost their freaking mind. They bring in the Andrew Garfield Peter Parker and the Tobey Maguire Peter Parker, and when I saw these two on screen, I love Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, I really like the Amazing Spider-Man films, but Tobey Maguire is who I grew up with. Tobey Maguire was my Spider-Man as a kid. And when I saw him coming back donning that costume, bro, it was an amazing moment. It was so much nostalgia, So many emotions, so many feelings. It was an absolutely amazing moment. I mean, it really was. It's just, I can't describe it. I mean, just it felt like I felt like a kid again. That's the best way I can put it. I felt like I went back in time, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So Toby and Andrew, they end up going to find Tom Holland, Peter Parker, and we get this amazing scene, bro. I cried when I saw this scene. Like, I'm not even afraid to admit that. I actually had tears in my eyes when I saw this scene. And even now, just talking about it, I can feel my eyes starting to water up. I can feel the emotion because this was such a great scene. We have Tobey Maguire Peter Parker. We have Andrew Garfield Peter Parker talking to Tom Holland Peter Parker about what it means to be Spider-Man, about what that line means. With great power comes great responsibility. And I mean, this whole scene just captured the essence of the character so well. Like, I can't even begin to describe how good this was. This was the moment where I took a step back and I was like, they get it. They get the character. They understand what makes Spider-Man, what makes Peter Parker who he is, what the character represents. And I'm just like, yes, they get it. They get it. This scene, everything about, with great power comes great responsibility. All of that was captured in this moment so well. They were talking about their own struggles. They were talking about, how Peter had problems with Harry and MJ, Tobey Maguire Peter, and how Andrew Garfield, Peter Parker, he lost, he lost Gwen, his MJ, as he calls her, I lost Gwen. She was my MJ. They explained to him, being Spider-Man, it does come with sacrifice. I think that's another way you could put it. With great power comes great responsibility, but also with great power comes great responsibility, and with great responsibility can come great sacrifice. Being Spider-Man's not easy, and the scene was so good. It just captured that so well. And this was the first time that I really felt like Tom Holland's Spider-Man really became Spider-Man, because in the previous films, in Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home, and even in, Civil War, I always felt like, Tom Holland as Spider-Man, he wasn't really Spider-Man. He was more so just, Tony Stark's sidekick. He was Iron Boy. He never really felt like Spider-Man to me. This movie and this scene, along with, the death of Aunt May scene, this really made me look at Tom Holland and be like, now that's Spider-Man. I mean, it was so good. Like, this is the first time in the MCU I felt like this character really felt like Spider-Man. So we get the three Spider-Man teaming up, and they go to fight the villains, and this is so freaking awesome, bro. They came up with all these. There's this scene where they're in a laboratory, and we really get to see the scientific aspect of the Peter Parker character on display from all three Peter Parkers. They come up with all these ways to try and fix the villains. They've got, serums to fix them, just different things. And so they end up going to fight the villains, and it's such an awesome fight. We get, Dr. Octopus has already been fixed, so he ends up teaming up with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. And there's this really nice scene, where Otto's like, Peter Parker, how are you, my boy? And Peter's like, doing better. And I'm just, sitting in the movie theater, just welling up with emotion, and I'm welling up with emotion right now just talking about it. But it was so good. Like, all these reunions were so good. They end up fighting all these villains, and they end up, fixing all of them. Kurt Connors gets fixed, Electro gets fixed, Sandman gets fixed, and then everything looks great and stuff. But there's this scene where Mary Jane, where MJ, from the MCU, she starts to fall and it looks like she's gonna die, and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man swings in there and saves her, and I'm like, freak yes, that's what I'm talking about. Because, of course, when Gwen Stacy fell, he couldn't save her in time. She died. And so this was his redemption moment. He swings in there and he saves MJ. He's like, I couldn't save my Gwen, but I'm going to save this other Peter Parker's Gwen. I'm going to save MJ, and I'm not going to let him go through what I had to go through. Because, he does say, he went through some very dark times. He went through some very, very, very gloomy and dark times as Spider-Man after Gwen Stacy died, which, again, I would really like to see that in a movie. I really hope we get an Amazing Spider-Man 3. But him saving MJ was such a fan-freaking-tastic moment. I loved it, bro. I loved it. So he saves MJ, and then what happens is that the only villain left is William Dafoe's Green Goblin, and he comes swooping in there, and he's like, "Can the Spider-Man come out to play?" And I'm just like, oh my god, William Dafoe is so good in this movie, bro. So there's a fight with Green Goblin. Tom Holland's pissed that he killed Aunt May. He's about to kill him, about to stab him with his own glider. And, Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker steps in, stops him, and he's like, no, this is not what Spider-Man does. So he stops him, is able to quell his anger, and then what does William Dafoe's Green Goblin do? Stabs Tobey Maguire in the back, and I'm like, oh, no. Oh, crap. They killed my Spider-Man. But no, he does survive. And it does, give Tom Holland's Peter Parker the opportunity to catch Norman Osborn by surprise, and he's able to stab him with a serum that ends up getting rid of the Green Goblin persona. And afterwards, you can just see Norman Osborn, now that he's in control and everything, he just looks up at Peter and he's like, Peter, what have I done? I mean, it's just... it's so good. It's such a great finale. So the villains are fixed, and it seems like everything seems to be good until they look up into the sky, and what starts happening is that you have these other Spider-Man universes, and I'm not sure if it's supposed to be like the cartoons or maybe some of the video games, but it's other, maybe even the comics themselves, but it's other universes of Spider-Man that are starting to bleed into the MCU. And so this is where Doctor Strange comes back, and he's like, okay, you know what? I can stop this. I can fix this. I can keep all these realities from crashing into one another if I just do the spell correctly. But of course, if he does a spell from the beginning of the movie correctly, that means that MJ and Ned and everybody else, all the superheroes, the Avengers, everybody at Stark Industries, even Doctor Strange himself are all going to forget Peter Parker, who he is, or that they even knew him. And, this whole movie, from the moment that Andrew and Toby showed up, this whole movie has been, the second half of the movie has really been building up this idea of who Spider-Man is, what he has to do, and of course, for the greater good, he has to make sacrifices. As Spider-Man, he has to make sacrifices. And so that's what ends up happening. You have this whole buildup of Tom Holland's arc, and now here he is about to finally make the sacrifice that he couldn't make in the beginning of the film, but he's ready to make it now because he knows what it means to be Spider-Man. He says goodbye to MJ, he says goodbye to Ned, and Doctor Strange casts a spell, and everybody returns to their universe. I don't really know what happens to the villains. It's kind of left ambiguous. Do they go back to their original timelines and they die there, but they end up dying, not as villains. They end up dying redeemed. They end up dying fixed. Is it more of a noble death type of thing, or is there alternate timelines created where the villains actually get to live and they get a second chance at life? I'm not really sure exactly how that played out, and there is some ambiguity there. But regardless, everybody ends up going back to their timelines, and it's a nice send off for the previous Spider-Man, and this really felt like a passing the torch moment from Toby and Andrew to Tom Holland. I mean, it was really, really nice. So in the MCU, everybody's forgotten that Peter is Spider-Man, and now he doesn't have the assistance of Stark Industries. He doesn't have their technology. He's just starting out fresh. He's having to start over again. He's having to create his own suit. He's having to create his own technology. He's having to do everything in regards to being Spider-Man. He's having to do himself. just like Toby and Andrew had to do. And for the first time, again, at the end of this film, this kind of felt like almost a soft reboot of the character, and it felt like for the first time in the MCU that this Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Like, this was the first time that he felt like he was actually Spider-Man and not just in Tony Stark's shadow. And it's a great freaking ending. It's a great freaking ending. I absolutely loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I love this movie so freaking much. Now, there is a after credits scene where we see Venom from the Sony Venom movies. And originally, they were actually going to have Venom involved in the battle in New York between the other Spider-Man villains versus the Three Spiderman. But they decided not to do that. So originally, we were going to get a Sinister Six. We were going to get, William Dafoe's Green Goblin. We were going to get the Sam Raimi Dr. Octopus, Sandman, Lizard, and Electro. And we were also going to get the new Venom from the new Sony movies. And they were going to be the Sinister Six. So we were going to get the Sinister Six, but they decided not to have Venom involved in the actual fight. He's in the MCU, or he was in the MCU the entire time that all the fighting's going on, but I think he was like down in South America or something. So when all the other characters end up returning to their original universes, so does that Venom also return. That Venom and that Eddie Brock also return to their original universe, but a piece of the symbiote is left behind. You see a little bit of black goo, a little bit of the Venom symbiote left behind. So what's that building up to? Is, are we going to get a Tom Holland, Peter Parker, black suit Spider-Man? Potentially, it could happen. I think that's definitely a possibility that we could be getting that, or, maybe something's going to happen to where it ends up becoming, I don't know, maybe some kind of, it gets experimented on, becomes some weird version of Carnage. I have no idea. They could possibly bring in Null from the comics, but that's kind of getting into speculation, and I'll have other videos to speculate on the future of the Tom Holland Spider-Man. And I also want to do a video talking about the potential of a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 4 and a Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man 3, but those are going to be in separate videos. But yeah, that's it. Like, I'm so excited to see where this goes. I've not really been that big of a fan of the Tom Holland Spider-Man. Not because of Tom Holland himself, it's just because, the way he's been written as Tony Stark's sidekick more than, being his own fleshed out character. Not really been a huge fan of him, to be honest with you. But after this film, I can't wait to see what they do with the character. I mean, they could really do something special here. And I'm really excited for the next MCU Spider-Man film. I love this film. This is one of the best films I've seen in years, guys. And as far as is this the best Spider-Man film? That's a tough one, man, because I really love Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, but this one I think is so good. I think this might be my new favorite Spider-Man film, because I think this film, I think this film more than any other Spider-Man film really captured the essence of what it means to be Spider-Man. So freak yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Because of that, this is my new favorite Spider-Man film. But tell me what you think about the film down in the comments section below. Also, be sure to subscribe, click the like button, click the bell for notifications so you guys can stay up to date on all of the new content coming out on the new channel. Comic book content. We're also going to have anime and manga content as well on this channel. And also follow me on Twitter. I'll have the link to my Twitter down in the description box below. But what did you think about this movie? Is it your new favorite Spider-Man film? Did you like this movie? Tell me in the comments section down below. Tomorrow, I will be putting out my review of the original Doctor Strange movie, as well as Doctor Strange 2, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I'll be putting out those reviews tomorrow right here on the channel. So be sure to subscribe, click the like button, click the bell for notifications so you can know when those videos come out. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Give me your thoughts in the comments down below. And I'm Jessica James, signing out.